My name is John Frigener, and in this three-part podcast, we will be exploring the different strategies that a physical education teacher can deploy to ensure that their students are engaged and on task, appropriately challenged, included, and their voice is heard. There's a few ways that you can keep your pupils engaged and on task. The first being, have your lesson activities already set up with cones, polls, etc. before the students arrive. By doing this, you avoid wasting the small amount of time that the kids already have with physical education. You could also have your kids help you set up if you are doing multiple games for one lesson. When choosing your games, try to avoid games that have long lines, such as baseball or kickball, because while the other kids are waiting in line for their turn, they will become bored, lose interest, and become off task. But if you do have a game that has a long line, have the kids that are waiting in line do something small, like stretch, jumping jacks, or push-ups, just to keep them engaged. When explaining a lesson, use appropriate language for your students. So if you have younger kids, try to keep your words small so they'll understand what you're saying. And also try to minimize instruction time to short and sweet. Kids will not want to listen to long lectures. And there is also multiple types of learners, so using demonstrations with asking the kids permission first is a good way of explaining how to do an exercise instead of only doing the command approach. If a child knows how to do a skill or sport, they could take on the role of coach to help develop the other children's skills. And finally, the number one thing that you should keep in mind is to make sure that your kids are having fun and enjoying themselves. Children are much more likely to stay on task and stay engaged if they are enjoying what they're doing. Keeping the pupils appropriately challenged is directly related to keeping them engaged and on task. If a task is not challenging enough, the pupil will eventually become off task. If children find a task too easy or too hard, they will not have fun and eventually lose interest in the sport. You have to have the task differentiated to find a good balance between the two. You can also teach the kids proper technique or form if they think that they have mastered a skill for a sport. This could result in them wanting to get better to see how good they could potentially get in the sport. If the students can do all the skills required for a sport, have them participate in that sport so their skill is tested and put to good use. The students will notice their skill has increased, and that will make them enjoy the sport even more. When including all the students, you will have kids with various skill levels, so it is very important that they can do all of the simple locomotive growth skills. If a student cannot do those skills that are the building blocks for various sport, they will not be able to succeed in them, resulting in the students not wanting to participate, which equals a drop in confidence, which could mean them stopping sport altogether. Another way is to introduce the students to different sports that they have never played before. So don't just use the usual sports like gymnastics or football. The final part of the podcast is making sure that the pupils are included and that their voice is heard. Ask the students what they have learned after the lesson, to self-evaluate to see if your lesson was successful or not. Nextly, provide lots of positive feedback to even the small things that the students do right or even attempt to do. By doing this increases the confidence of your kids. Tell the student if they have improved in a skill, and plan out lessons with clear success criteria so the student will realize their own success in that particular lesson. Another way is split the kids into groups so that they can communicate and learn from each other instead of just the teacher being the only one providing instructions. When you split the groups split them into different skill levels so that one student can learn from another. And finally, when asking students questions, call on specific kids instead of just asking a group. This way, a shy student may be able to answer the questions instead of one particular loud student always answering. If a physical education teacher deploys these strategies that I have mentioned in this podcast, then they will have a beneficial and successful lesson for their students. Thanks for listening.